Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Hello. It is the Fantasy Football Hustle. It's Tuesday night. Everybody's doing their waivers. They're ready to rock and roll. And so are we. Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. Joined as always by, I used to call him the next big thing in fantasy football, but now he's just the damn big thing. Dwain McFarland.
Just trying to keep up with you, Drake.
Remember those days when like 4 people would listen to this show? And we're like, someday, Dwain, someday.
That's just how I assume it still is.
Yeah. Instead of 4, there's 14.
There's 14 of you guys, and we appreciate you. We
love you, man. We appreciate all the guys who are following us on social media. They're checking us out on YouTube. They're hitting subscribe. They're leaving comments. They're even checking out what beer that I'm going to drink this week. And thanks to everybody who did that. I'll start doing it on the reg. And this week, we're cracking open Southern Tier Lakeshore Fog. Thanks for everybody who voted. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying one with us tonight. So it's week 7. Holy moly. Dwayne's got the water. Maybe that's Mezcal? Tequila? What is that?
Yeah, got the Topo Chico going, Drake.
I live in upstate New York, man. That could just be well water for us, for all we know.
That's probably what it is, and we pay a premium for it. It tastes good, so it's really good well water.
Hey, man, I'll take it right now. I'm going to be dehydrated as hell. I figured the folks would want me to drink in some like 9% beer, so by the end of the show, I'm like slurring, asking about the Antonio Gibson usage. So if you're new to the
when
hustle,
you talk about Antonio Gibson usage, there's definitely slurring and probably like cussing, like lots of things. So I think that would be like appropriate.
So kind of what we do here, folks, if you're new to the show, is we go around the league on Tuesdays, hit on all the data points that Dwayne gets from his great gig over at PFF, and we tell you not only who to maybe pick up, but why. How are players being used? Make smart roster decisions. Don't just say, hey, this guy scored 2 touchdowns like the player we're going to lead off with this week. Is his role any different than it was a week ago? And don't overreact to maybe data points that don't matter. So with that said, let's kick things off in Detroit with Deandre Swift. Everyone seems to be going nuts now. It's Deandre Swift season. We're putting Adrian Peterson to pasture, right, Dwayne? After this performance with Mr. Swift going 14 carries for 116 and 2 scores.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Swift's a guy that we talked about in the preseason that we really liked. We said he was a great, 6th-round target. And, it just hasn't really worked out. But this last weekend, he just made the most of his touches, Drake. And the team ran 77 plays, the most that they've ran since week 1. So there was more to go around. But no, his role did not change at all. So here are his snaps from week 1 through week 6, percentage-wise: 44, 34, 9%, 38%, 38%. Here are his routes. 49%, 37%, 13%, 43%, 27%. His targets: 13, 17. These are percentages: 13, 17, 6, 14, 13. Looking at his third down role, it's been a little bit all over the board. He's getting about a third of it. He had 22% of it, long down and distance this last week. He is always getting 100% pretty much of the 2-minute work. So that's like the role he gets every week. He gets all the 2-minute drill stuff. So if they go hurry up, they go into the 2-minute offense, like he's the dude. So, I mean, he's getting high leverage stuff, Drake. The nice thing this last weekend, 75%, of the rushes inside the 5, but some of that came down to he was the back that was on the field when they drove the field. And so he got to stay in. I don't know that it's a changing of the guard, right? Of, we're going to, to your point, put Adrian Peterson to pasture and he's not going to be the guy inside the 5 because, up until now, on the season, it's been something where all of the guys have been involved. Now, I will say Swift has gotten more looks than anybody inside the 5. So that's the beauty of him. He's going to be on, I think of him like James White without quite as many snaps, but he has that receiving role, but he gets about half the work inside the 5, which James White doesn't get, right, as a rusher. So he's basically like a James White in a way, maybe a little less game script dependent, more performance dependent. He's basically going to get, 40% of the work, 40% goes to Peterson, and then 20% goes to Kerryon Johnson, if we're just making it real simple. But to your point, nothing has changed. And do we think that Detroit is going to change because the guy had a good week? Now, they could, but how many times have we said that, Drake? How many times have we said that about players? How many times this preseason did people complain to us and tell us how dumb we were because Joe Mixon was going to get all the passing work because Gio Bernard's not good? Josh Jacobs, he's going to be an every down back because Jalen Richard sucks. These coaches just keep doing this stuff, And so for me, and again, I'm not saying Swift may not eventually take over the backfield this year. I'm not going to bet on it, though. If I can sell him high this week based on some other person in my league thinking he's taken over this backfield, he's a young back, oh my God, he scored a touchdown, he's going to go off. And you can fetch a very nice price because look at all the running back injuries. You can get you a very solid low-end wide receiver 1, maybe a mid wide receiver 2. If you can pull off a trade like that for something you feel great about and the player's role and it's going to be there all season and it helps your team, do it. Do it. Could you be wrong and DeAndre Swift goes off? Yeah, but what are the odds, Drake? Like, what would you put him at?
I mean, people forget, I think, that Adrian Peterson still had, I believe, it was 15 carries and scored a touchdown. So he's definitely in the mix. They brought him in and just threw.
It's not just 2; it's 3 guys.
And they got Kerryon still there. You got to think the game script for these guys is going to be negative. They got a pretty good schedule coming up. Really, we'd love to see the passing work just really blow up for Swift. If he can continue to dominate that role and maybe take some of those to the house and blow up as a receiver, now we're really working. But I don't see Peterson going away. If he's on your waiver wire, would he be your number 1 ad at running back?
Absolutely.
For
absolutely.
Sure.
Like, yeah, still. I mean, look, young, don't misunderstand me. Being able to have young running back talent on your roster that does have upside, you always want to have it and you're willing to spend for it. Just don't expect this from him every week. That's what I'm saying. And if you can sell him high, you do it. You just nailed it on the head. This is New England's backfield. If you didn't have Cam Newton and you truly still had like the 2-down banger, that's Adrian Peterson, which would also be Sony Michel, right? Mm-hmm. Or before that, LeGarrette Blount. Or before that, what was the other guy from LSU? Stephen Ridley. Like, we can keep going back. Like, that's Adrian Peterson's role.
Yep.
And then you've got James White or Shane Vereen. That's DeAndre Swift. And then you've got Rex Burkhead. That's Kerryon Johnson. I mean, that's literally what we're talking about here.
That's a great analogy.
Exact thing. It's the same exact thing. So you have to ask yourself, how excited would you be, about James White with a little bit more work inside the 5, but a little bit less work in the passing game? That's essentially what DeAndre Swift is. And if you can get something really good for him, you sell. Now, you don't give him away. Don't go trade him for a wide receiver 4. Don't go just move him just to move him. Get something of value. If not, just sit on him.
Probably the name everyone's going to be reaching for on the wire this week is Boston Scott. Miles Sanders is down for 3 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury. It's kind of waiver palooza here, so we'll just do a little Eagles segment because seemingly at every position they have someone to add. So they're playing Thursday night against the Giants, who their defense with New York, they're middle of the road, okay? They're not as awful as we say they are, but they're not good. They're just kind of middle. So anyways, let's focus on Boston Scott. People are going to go all in saying, hey, Boston Scott's the guy. He's what he was last year. This ain't the case, folks. 4 new offensive linemen for the Philadelphia Eagles this week. They have 17 new players between offense and defense from their starting training camp roster that are out there on the field. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, Dwain. But Boston Scott, he'll have a passing game role. But between the tackles, I think you're going to see more Corey Clement. We'll see who they bring up from the practice squad. But I think it's foolish to say, hey, Boston Scott is going to be this guy who's going to go out and rush for 100 yards just because we saw him kind of break off some stuff last year. He's not the same player, and this line is abysmal.
Yeah, I think he's a stopgap player. You just don't want to get carried away. The beauty of Boston Scott is he's going to be involved in the passing game, and really in this offense, that's all you care about. Like, is there really more than like 15 carries to go around? You just want the guy that's going to be out there when they're throwing the ball. That's it. And if Boston Scott, you think he's going to be that guy, then yeah, I'm going to spend some money on him. But to your point, you do have to take the context of what we're talking about here. This is not a great offense. There's been a lot of injuries. Could he have a lot of work funneled to him over these next few games? Absolutely. But again, it's a short-term fix on a team that's not near as good. I think Boston Scott's a really good player, and he will be the guy on the field the absolute most, just because the Eagles are going to be trailing for the most part. This last week, to your point, I don't think we know. I saw some folks say, well, Corey Clement wasn't involved, so he's not going to be involved. I don't think we know. I mean, the Eagles trailed on 94% of their snaps last week.
How about
so I don't think
1?
Corey Clement's going to be out there a lot in that kind of a scenario. You know what I mean? So I think, yeah, and to your point, like Corey Clement did get some work on week 1. So I agree. Yeah. Like when the game is close or if they happen to be ahead, you're probably going to see those guys splitting more work. When it gets out of hand and they fall behind, it will more, it's going to lean more to Boston Scott.
Yeah. If you look back to week 1, Scott out-touched Clement 11-8. That's it. 11-8 in week 1. And there, as I want to just expand upon, there's nowhere for anyone to run. So 2 weeks ago, Miles Sanders had a 74-yard touchdown run. He finished the day with 80 yards rushing. This last week, he had 118 yards rushing and again broke off another 70-yard run. So it's bad news. But if you need a guy this week, and we know there's 4 teams on bye, there's the Vikings, so there's no Cook, there's no Madison, there's no Ravens, so there's no Ingram, no Jonathan Taylor with the Colts, and no Gaskin with the Dolphins. So people are going to be going to the waiver wire and trying to find replacements. Let's just stick here in Philly. If you need a quarterback, don't look now, but Carson Wentz is a top 10 guy, Dwain. I mean, he's throwing to me, you, and, God only knows, Ryan Hallam down the street. But, man, oh, man, he's coming through, and he's throwing to Travis Fulgham, who is somehow available. I pulled this number. He's only rostered in 46% of Yahoo leagues, so 54% of leagues, this guy's available. Folks, he's the starting X in Philadelphia for the rest of the year. Don't just get him and plug him in. I mean, this week I think he's going to get some James Bradbury shadow coverage, but these 2 guys probably should not be on your waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, the situation better than me as far as if he's going to just continue to be the X all year. But if he does, I mean, 12 targets and then 9 targets. I mean, does 21 targets over 2 weeks just sit out there on your waiver wire? I mean, it shouldn't be, to your point. I mean, so that's 34% and 26%. And then from an air yards perspective, 29% and 31%. He's out there for all the 2-minute work. He's out there on all the long down and distance. So they trust the guy, at this point. And over the last 2 weeks, he's gotten 33% and 43% of the end zone targets. So yeah, I mean, Fulgham looks really good. The only concerning thing I see with him is he doesn't get a ton of first read targets, meaning that Wentz is looking elsewhere, and then he's coming to Fulgham.
Because everybody else sucks. Back to this guy.
Yeah, the only problem that starts to be that could be problematic there, right, is once like a Rager gets back or, a Goddard, somebody that can actually be a viable target that's actually going to be open when Wentz looks at him, and he doesn't have to go to his next read. That could hurt Fulgham. But at the same time, Fulgham's played so well that he could start becoming a first read. I mean, last week, if you think about it, this is kind of crazy. I mean, he had 9 targets, only 4 of them he was the first read. That's pretty low. That. Typically, a receiver, if you're looking at a receiver from a first read, perspective, on average, 76% of the time, they're the first read in the progression on their target. And so he's at 44%, then at 67%. He's at 63% on the year. So he does lag behind his teammates for whatever reason. But again, that's something that can change, as they gain more trust. Wentz is dealing it to him one way or another. So I think, to your point, I'm down with Travis Fulgham. I'm not going to go break the bank for him. I still worry about what happens when all the other guys come back. To me, though, Drake, again, the Eagles better than me. Just what's the point, right? And Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. Well, I mean, really, what's the point?
Alshon Jeffrey, if you want to, I know people that want to pick him up and think this is this guy, like, back from the Super Bowl season, and it's not. I mean, he had this really bad Liz Frank injury and just started really running, doing football moves a few weeks ago. I read that he did some scout team work last week, and he's just starting to do some things that aren't individual drills. So, I mean, who knows what shape he's in and how many plays he can truly give the offense. And let's be honest, it's probably going to get re-injured and he'll be out. Going forward, it's going to be, you're going to have Fulgham, you're going to have Rager, if you get anything out of Djax, and then one of the tight ends. And if you listen to my little 5-minute waiver video that I put out, which if you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get every single Tuesday morning. I put that out. It's 5 quick minutes. And I talked to you about Dallas Goedert. And Zach Ertz is hurt. Not that he was giving you anything, but Goddard is going to be coming back. They say a week 8 target, but the Eagles have a week 9 bye. So it could be week 10 against the Giants. He has a fractured ankle. People think like, oh, he's just magically coming back because that's when his window on the IR opens. Guy had a fractured ankle, folks. So we got to wait and see. It's not just, hey, you're back, start running around. But if you can stash him on an IR, by all means. All right, Dwayne, let's keep moving around the running back. Actually, no, this is where I want to go next. We talked about my favorite team. Let's go to your favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys. What a complete dumpster fire last night. First of all, how many shots did you do during the game? And wow. I mean, Dalton was abysmal. 54 attempts in a 38-10 loss to Arizona. So I guess we can just open it up. What do we expect now from Dalton, from Zeke? This offensive line just lost a left tackle. These wide receivers, it's stock up, stock down. I mean, whoo, boy, I'll let you take the floor on this one.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. Well, we talked about it quite a bit, right, on the show last week. And, my prediction was that all stock goes down across the board. And it's just because, I mean, Dak was doing a lot to handle the offensive line woes, to handle some of the coaching inadequacies, to be real blunt. Like when you see what Kyle Shanahan does, basically to nurse Jimmy Garoppolo back to health on a Sunday night. Honestly, when you see what Sean McVay does just to get Jared Goff through a season, like that's the kind of stuff you do when you got a guy like Dalton coming into a game. You do, and they tried to do a little bit of this, but you try to get the guy in a rhythm, right? You give him some easy throws. You give him some manufactured yards. You get the defense guessing to slow down the pass rush, right? I mean, you saw it. The freaking Cardinals are loading up every play with no fear of anything, and that goes on coaching. Yes, the offensive line was bad, but that is on Mike McCarthy.
There's 8-9 guys lined up on the line of scrimmage every play.
That is on Kellen Moore. That is a lack of an ability to adapt your game plan. I mean, it's terrible, really. It's embarrassing. So that's, I think, your bigger problem, right? Because a lot of coaches can figure this out. Look, to Doug Peterson's credit, like as bad as the Eagles get, like he figures stuff out, on how to tape it together and make it work. And I give him credit on that. And Mike McCarthy, just doesn't seem to be that guy. And we've been told all along that he's not that guy. He tried to run the same system forever until basically every team knew all of his calls, all of the pre-checks, everything. And he just tried to keep sticking with it. And so now for us to expect that he's really just going to change mid-season with the Cowboys, I just don't know that we're going to see that, Drake. And so like for me, it really sucks because, CeeDee Lamb is on a lot of my fantasy teams personally. I know a lot of people that listen to this show have invested, heavily in CeeDee Lamb. Thank goodness, we were getting him later. And, he's already served a purpose. He's won, he's a big part of, our success early in the season if you're in a deeper league. And, we've helped you with T. Higgins and Justin Jefferson. So hopefully you've been able to add some additional guys. But everywhere I can, Drake, I'm getting CeeDee Lamb on the bench. I don't own a ton of Amari Cooper because he was expensive, but I would be scared to death. Michael Gallup, I would be scared to death if you weren't already scared. So if you look at last night, Amari had 20%, of the targets. CD had 20% of the targets. They both ended up with 10 because the Cowboys had to run 89 plays, basically because, they couldn't stop the Cardinals. So the Cardinals just would basically go down the field, a bomb to Christian Kirk, here, turn around, give it back to the Cowboys. Now, if I wanted to take a glass half full, look, it's only one game. Zeke did come out and immediately bury them, so who knows? Maybe they had some more things planned for Dalton Drake that were designed to get him comfortable and get him rolling. But Zeke just, crapped the bed right away and fumbled the ball twice, to which both things ended up being scores. I think that was on drive 3 and drive 4, after the defense actually had rallied to hold the Cardinals in the first 2 drives and looked like they had a little bit of a spark. But now you're hearing the rumors of the locker room is splintering. They don't believe in the coaching staff.
Right.
There's a lot of crap going on right now with the Cowboys. So if you can unload Cowboys and not have to do it too cheaply, I would not be afraid to do it. I'm not expecting some sort of resurrection from Andy Dalton. Hopefully you didn't go blow a ton of dollars on him last week. I told you to temper expectations. So hopefully you did that and you didn't, go all in thinking he was going to give you, 90% or 95% of what Dak does, especially behind this offensive line. If you saw those aerial or the pictures from the top down, did you see the pocket? He's literally in less than a phone booth, having to try to throw these balls. So part of you just feels for Andy Dalton. What do you do, in a situation like that? The one positive thing I will say, Drake, for Amari Cooper is his snaps did resurge. I think he was kind of dinged up the 2 weeks before, so he was up around 90% for his snaps, 91% for the routes. CD was at 75%. Gallup was at 84%.
Yeah, that was something to watch. I thought that Mike McCarthy would turn it around, being that we sent him a free PFF subscription. He's Mr. Analytics now, but hey, to each their own. Let's see here. If we're looking at the waiver wire, I know guys love that. A name you might be thinking about or you not thinking about because you haven't heard of him is Jamichael Hastie. So Raheem Mostert goes down with his ankle injury. He's got a high ankle sprain. Let's throw him on the shelf for a couple of weeks. So Dwain and I talk about this all the time. The, never-ending carousel of backs in San Francisco with this Shanahan offense. You got Hastie. Don't forget about Jeff Wilson. Oh, Tevin Coleman's going to be coming back soon. Don't forget. Oh, Jerick McKinnon's still there. So are you getting on the carousel here, Dwain? You jumping off? What do you want to do with this?
The key is, and what's nice is typically you can do these moves for cheap. So if you think Jeff Wilson's not going to play this week, and I haven't even read the latest today on Jeff Wilson, it sounds like Coleman's still another week away. Obviously, we know Mostert's going to be out. What happened? You saw what happened. Did you watch that game?
I did not.
Yeah. So what happened in that game is they went to McKinnon, and I know because I was doing a showdown slate, and I used McKinnon a ton, and my team was going off. I got up to 54th place, I think. And Mostert went down. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be one of those great showdown nights. And McKinnon came in for 2 drives and just looked tentative. He didn't have the burst we saw earlier in the season. I don't know if he's nicked up, but he just wasn't going out there and hitting the hole, attacking the line of scrimmage. And I just felt it in my gut. I'm like, he's going to go to Hastie. He's going to go to him. And then you know what? He did. He went to him 4 or 5 drives in a row. He went to Hastie, and McKinnon went back to just being the receiving down back. Now, this is Kyle Shanahan. We saw the week before Mostert came back, right? We saw McKinnon literally dominate the whole backfield. So I think there is something to the hot hand. The guy that he thinks looks the best could on any week, just really take over when they're down to limited numbers, right, in their backfield, when they don't have, multiple guys healthy. So Hastie's a guy that, you can drop. I saw some stuff out there today 20, 30% of your fab. No way. 5%. Calm down. Tevin Coleman's going to be back. Mostert will eventually be back. McKinnon, is still going to be involved. And again, Hastie could just as easily not get anything. So I like him because you should be able to get him cheap, but don't go spend a lot of money on Jamichael Hastie. Because even if he goes off for 2 weeks, when the other guys come back, it's going to turn back into a committee.
Oh, yeah. We're not going to talk about teams that are either on bye or coming off bye. There's not much to break down there. So The one thing I will say, though, is Justin Jackson is only owned in 50% of Yahoo leagues. So we
talked about him last week.
Yeah. Check out the show last week in the archives. But if he's out there, get on board. Let's jump up another name people might be interested in. Let's see. Bopping around. How about in Cincinnati? Joe Mixon injures his foot. We've got Gio Bernard maybe on your waiver wire. You got the Browns in week 7. They're stingy against the run. Mixon scores his 3rd touchdown of the season, saved his fantasy day. So I want to get your thoughts on that. And boy, oh boy, is Higgins just looking like the man out there. 6 for 125 as the dominant X player. I don't know why AJ Green even puts his jockstrap on anymore. Just move on. You're done.
Yeah. So with Mixon, is another guy that I haven't got to read. I've had my head down like with the other job, and then doing the utilization article last night. So like I haven't got to read like what they're saying about his foot, Drake. So I mean, if you have anything additional there, like I'll pause for that first.
Let's see. Talk about your love of. I'll look that up. You tell us your love.
Yeah, I'll hit Higgins. So yeah, with Higgins, I mean, we've talked about him so many different weeks, but his target shares over the last 4 weeks, 23%, 21%, 23%, 21%. I mean, he's locked in. That's 8, 7, 6, 8. The guy's going to be in the 6 to 9 target range every single week. His air yard percentage, 43%, 36%, 43%, 24%. They're even moving him around into the slot a little bit. Unlike a guy like Fulgham, first read targets, 88%, 100%, 86%, 89%. So very active. He's also getting a lot of play action looks. I mean, you really can't ask for more, Drake. And there are other weapons in the offense that are good enough that even though this team struggles, they can't just focus in on Higgins. And just a quick thing on AJ Green. He did come back, run 86% of the routes, and actually led the team in targets last week with 11, 28% target share, 39% of the air yards. He was dropped a lot last week, including like in very deep formats, like some of the ones I play in. So AJ Green, if I need a receiver this week, I'm not afraid, to pick up AJ Green and try to use him. Am I trusting him to last, the season? No. But I mean, he's had 3 weeks this year where he's really had eventually this is going to hit, even if he's not that great of a player anymore. 135 air yards, 220 air yards, and 144 air yards. He's eventually going to connect on one of those days. And he's going to put up a 25 to 30 point fantasy, performance. And maybe he gets hurt, in the last play of the game. We don't see him the rest of the season, but you can deal with that later. So with a guy like AJ Green, if he's sitting out there on the wire, I have no problem, picking him up. Some people may go nuts on him on name value and the targets that he got last week. I wouldn't go overboard like that. But I mean, if you need to put 15% on the guy if you think you just need somebody to help you get through a couple of weeks, I would still be okay with owning AJ Green. Yes, Drake is right. He does not look good. He doesn't look the same, but they're still going to him. And he said he let his team down the week before, and he came out, and had one of his better performances of the season, for what it's worth.
So looking stuff up here, who knew I had a subscription to The Athletic? Apparently I do. Joe Mixon left with a foot injury, but
he came back. Yeah, he came back to finish the game. He left, but came back like for the first play. He was back by the first play of the second half. So I was just assuming the guy was fine. But I mean, here's the thing. I don't think Gio is the true handcuff to Joe Mixon. I think, that he would probably remain in a role kind of similar, to what he's, currently in. I think, hang on, I got to look. It's Travion, right? Or did Travion get hurt too? I got to go look. I wasn't prepared for this question.
Look at this. Hitting him with all that.
Samaje Perine, I know, was active for that game, and he had a couple of plays. But I don't even know if Travion Wilson is healthy either. For some reason, I thought he got hurt in the preseason, but I don't know if it was a season-ending, injury.
I did see him in one article that now I can't find him, but yeah, we're digging deep here.
Now go ahead. You keep going. I'm just looking at Travion Williams to see if he's hurt.
I'm going to jump over to the New York Jets. I don't know why, but we can probably do this.
Guys. Why are you doing this to us? And
because people are desperate for running back, and then we need to let them know Jamichael Perine got a little work, only 7 for 27. So God bless you if you need a warm body out there. But I did want to mention Brashad Perriman, who came back in, and he did see over 20% of Sam Darnold's targets. So if you're dying at receiver on a team that's going to be throwing a ton because they're terrible, let's face it, Brashad Perriman may be out there.
Yeah, I mean, P. Ryan is going to get about a third of the rushing work. He had almost 70% of the long down and distance and almost 70% of the 2-minute drill. So basically, what you have is Gore is the 2-down banger, and P. Ryan is the change of pace / long down and distance 2-minute operator, if you will. And Perriman, yes, was the second most targeted player on the team behind Jamison Crowder, and he did have a very nice ADOT. Not that it's worth a ton, but look, air yards do matter, and he's going to see a lot of them, as long as his knee stays healthy.
I love the guys in the chat room here who are watching live with us on YouTube, and yeah, we're going to hit some of those in a minute.
And Travion is not hurt. Like, he's on the roster. So it's Samaje P. Ryan and Travion Williams if for some reason there is a deal with Joe Mixon. So you guys will just have to monitor that, and we'll have to see what are the beat writers saying as far as really who's next up.
The beat writers last week in LA were saying that Cam Akers is going to get more work. I guess that was out of the mouth of Sean McVay, but he's officially on milk carton watch here, Dwayne. 1 snap in week 6. Yikes. It's all Darrell Henderson and a little Malcolm Brown.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at this game, I don't know that we really have a true read on it. Now, we do know that if they're getting blown out, we're not, as of right now, right, we're not going to see Cam Akers. And so that's kind of what you dealt with this last week. The Rams trailed on 100%. Of their snaps this past weekend. So not good. I mean, obviously they're right out of the gate. San Francisco went down the field, scored. So put you in a situation where, you're playing from behind the whole time. And typically, the Rams are one of the run heaviest teams in the league. Last week they had to pass 67% and they ran 33%. So we know who the long down and distance and 2-minute guy is. That's Malcolm Brown. And then we know who is the starting running back, from a rushing perspective, and that's Darrell Henderson. So in this particular game script where they didn't get to run the ball as much, there just wasn't as much to go around. But Cam Akers' role is really to give Darrell Henderson a breather. So we talked about earlier the Lions. You've got Peterson, right? Then you've got Swift, and then you've got Kerryon. Basically, Akers is Kerryon. Right now. Malcolm Brown is Swift, right? And Darrell Henderson is Adrian Peterson. Literally, that's what it is. It's the same. It's almost the same exact thing. You're just on a team that runs the ball more than what the Lions do. So there's a little bit more to go around. Yeah, Darrell Henderson looks good, by the way.
He does.
Like, just give the guy the damn job. Just let him have it. Like, look, I know we were on Cam Akers, but we can move on. And we just wanted a piece of the Rams backfield, and it turns out Akers blew it and he got hurt. And Darrell Henderson stepped in. It could have just as easily been Akers not getting hurt. He was kind of the guy they wanted to do it. But once that happened, you just got to shift. Drake, we got to move on.
You had a great tweet over the weekend. You should be following Dwain at Dwain McFarland, DWAIN McFarland. I'm at Drake Fantasy, and the show is at FF Hustle. But Dwain tweeted out, he goes, something to the effect of, I think Kareem Hunt's better when Nick Chubb plays. So he had 40 rushing yards on 13 attempts in a blowout loss. And the weird thing was he wasn't solely used as the pass-catching back as they're in hurry-up mode, only catching 2 of his 3 targets. What gives? Come on, McFarland. I thought this was our guy.
Yeah, dude. Like, look, coaches do crazy stuff, man. I don't know. I can't explain it. Like the week before, 70% of snaps, 60% of the routes. I mean, he was really looking like somebody that was basically game script proof, if you will. And it can be an every down back involved in the passing game, works inside the 5, gets the majority of the rushing, work, gets a little bit of relief there. But no, that didn't happen. Now, part of that could have been because, we had a lot of blowouts this weekend, right? Which does affect like some of this stuff. So I try not to get overreact. There was definitely some carries that went to, who's the Dontrell Hilliard in total garbage time. So he picked up, about 10 to 12% of the carries and a few passing downs that I know would have went to Hunt, had it not been a complete blowout. But what was more concerning is why is Kareem Hunt is one of the best receiving backs in the league, right? We've never debated this. That's the one thing we've always loved about him. On third or fourth down and plus 7 yards, long down and distance, 0% for Kareem Hunt? Like what? 100% for Dearness Johnson, Drake. You got to get Dearness Johnson on the field.
It's like they just slid him into that Nick Chubb role.
Yeah. Now, they're giving him more than the Nick Chubb role in the passing game, but to your point, they're not giving him the full Kareem Hunt like treatment that we were hoping for. I still think he's easily an RB1 over these next several weeks. That was a weird game script. I mean, literally, they got destroyed. Like the Steelers just dismantled them. Yeah, they appear to be legit. And look, their defense isn't even really playing good yet. Like that defense still has a lot of room to play better based on the talent, that's available, for the Steelers. So the Browns seem to be a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of team, Drake. So we're probably going to have to deal with some of this, throughout the season. So you're sticking with Kareem Hunt if you got him. You just honestly, when Nick Chubb went down, if you were one of the folks that drafted him, you probably thought, wow, over the next 4 to 5 weeks, I'm going to destroy people. And I thought you would too. And unfortunately, this is just the way fantasy football goes sometimes, man. It's just weird.
Some guys in the chat room want to talk about Melvin Gordon. So he's got this DUI situation, could be suspended for a little bit. Then he was sick and we don't know. So let's just kind of reset Denver. Drew Locke returns, doesn't look good at all. Phil Lindsay goes over 100 yards. And next week they get this porous Kansas City rush defense. Then you've got Tim Patrick basically playing the Cortland Sutton role, giving us another 100-yard game. That's back-to-back for him. He's got 15 targets over the last 2 weeks. So someone, if you need a receiver and he's on the wire, I would scoop Tim Patrick up in a heartbeat. What are your thoughts here on the Broncos?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start, with the positives. I mean, you already talked about, Tim Patrick. Jerry Jeudy also is back to full strength. He ran a route on 96%, of dropbacks. So I would feel good about Jerry Jeudy. I would feel good about Tim Patrick. When Noah Fant comes back, that is going to dilute things a little bit more. But at the same time, it can help, right? When you got 3 really good weapons on the field, it's the rule of 3. It becomes more problematic for defenses. Bad defenses can't take one thing away. Below average defenses can't take 2 receivers away. Average defenses can't take 2 receivers away. Like, it takes really good defenses to take away 3 good receiving options, and most defenses aren't equipped to do it. And so if you've got 3 viable options, Andrew Locke can come around a little bit. And Locke didn't play as bad as, his line was bad, but like I actually, for whatever reason, watched quite a bit of that game. And like I didn't think Drew Locke looked terrible. I thought he looked like a guy that was still learning his weapons around him, had been out of the game, and he was playing a pretty tough defense, from a coverage perspective. Was his accuracy great? No, but I also didn't think he played terrible. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, obviously, and we'll see how that goes. But Tim Patrick, 96% of the routes, 35% of the targets, 46% of the air yards. I mean, he's like Fulgham, but we know this guy's locked into this role. He doesn't have somebody else coming back, right, that could take his role. Sutton's done for the year. So, I mean, I think Patrick is a guy that's going to operate right there in that wide receiver 3 range. He's going to give you some wide receiver 2 weeks, might pop for a wide receiver 1 week here or there. And I think you can expect the same thing of Jerry Jeudy, as well. I think he's right there. It's going to be another one of these rookies, dude. This might be the best overall season that we've seen, like just from total rookie production. We've had like a few studs before really play well. But like just looking across like the entire class of how these guys are all contributing on their teams. And I think Judy's best football is definitely still ahead of him. As far as Lindsay goes, we'll have to see what happens, with Melvin Gordon. But to your point, he looked really good. He played 63% of the snaps, 40% went to Royce Freeman. So they're still interested in watering this thing down and not really letting one guy have all the work. But he did get 23 of the carries versus 8 for Freeman. So that's 64 to 22%. He long down and distance for whatever reason. Freeman's the guy that's out there, and they didn't have any 2-minute offense, so I didn't really get to see what they were going to do with that. So Lindsay's a guy that I like. He's a very talented player. We've talked about him before. He's probably one of the most underrated running backs in the league. He's very explosive, very decisive as a runner, not super powerful, but he can make somebody miss, and he's got breakaway speed, and they're trying to use him a little bit in the passing game. So, yeah, I think Lindsey is squarely in the RB2 conversation with RB1 upside until Melvin Gordon returns.
I want to give a shout out to the one guy watching us on Twitch. We don't know anything about Twitch, and probably our page there is awful, but shout out to you, one guy watching us on Twitch. We appreciate you. Say hi in the chat room. We'll answer your question. Let's talk about a couple things here in the chat room. It'll allow us to maybe knock out another team or two. Steven Dominguez asks.
Love Steven Dominguez.
Does Ronald Jones keep his job when Fournette is healthy? And I'm a card-carrying member of the I Hate Rojo squad, but, man, he's just getting it done. I got to tip my cap to the kid.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see, but I think to your point, like the role they're asking him to play is the same role that we've talked about the whole time, and he is doing well with that, which means he's getting all the carries, and then when it's time, like it's any critical play or any critical moment, they literally tell him to get off the field still. Like, you're not out there for third downs, Ronald. Ronald's like, come on, coach, let me play that. No 2-minute work for you, Ronald. Coach, come on, man, inside the 5, like, let me play. They actually gave him some of that this last week, Drake. So finally they got down to having literally no one, and he did get 2 carries inside the 5 after the turnovers by Aaron Rodgers and his Key and Pill moment, which was called back. So, which basically just ignited the Bucs. Maybe there's a bunch of Key and Pill fans on the Bucs. I don't know, but anyway, after that, it's like the whole game was over. But Jones does, like, to your point, he looks really good doing what he's being asked to do, and we've talked about that earlier on the show this season. Is that look, he actually does look good, but they still don't want him to be near the ball passing. I do worry that when Fournette comes back, that he has to start splitting some of this work too. So here's the deal with Jones. For now, I mean, you're starting him, right? I mean, I don't know why you're not. I mean, there's so many running backs hurt. You're going to be putting him in your lineup for the most part if you own him. I do think he's going to become game script dependent. I think he's already game script dependent. You've just seen, over the last 2 weeks, the Bucs have been in very close games or they've been leading, and that's really helped Ronald Jones. But that's not a knock. There's a lot of running backs that sit in the same bucket as Ronald Jones. Essentially, he's basically just below. He's a tier below Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs and those guys, because they still at least see 30 to 40% of the work as far as routes go. Like, Ronald Jones, the only way he sees those routes, right, is if the team, is leading. But he doesn't. You won't be able to count on him if the Bucs get in a shootout and they need more of the 2-minute offense, or if all of a sudden they're just having a week where they're not doing what they need to do on first or second down, then he's just totally going to disappear from the passing game.
We can talk about the Washington football team here, I guess, because Shirley Shapiro.
Because why? I want to hear, Drake. Why?
Yeah, because Shirley asks, can you please prioritize Antonio Gibson, Jerick McKinnon, and Deandre Swift in a standard league? Well, number one, she is our first and only female listener, so Shirley, cheers to you. And you're still playing a standard league. We got to fix that. We got to get you.
No, we have more. We have several female listeners, but
several.
We do. I don't know how many for sure, but I know. Yeah,
I think my mom.
I appreciate everyone, period. And so to take nothing away from Shirley, yeah, let's absolutely answer the question. So it's a prioritization of Deandre Swift, Antonio Gibson, and who was the third, Drake?
Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, it's Swift. Swift is in a role right now that we know has been his. And yes, he did produce more than really his utilization, which happens, right? So, but we at least know he has a role and he has a chance to earn more. McKinnon's going to be a stopgap, right? And it's easily for me. It's Swift at the top.
Hey, our guy from Twitch actually did respond and gave us a question.
Well, let's answer it.
Yeah. So I had a blockbuster trade. Mostert went down again. So I traded Zeke, Pollard, Evan, and Tim Patrick for Connor, Anderson, Cooper, and Bell. I had okay. I don't think this is even a question. He's just telling us how this is a great trade he pulled off. I have Gaskin.
So he moved Zeke and Mike Evans and Tim Patrick, and he picked up James Conner. So James Conner for Zeke. I still lean Zeke. He got Robbie Anderson for Evans. I would lean Robbie Anderson right now, but that's still close. He got Amari Cooper for Tim Patrick. I'm still going to definitely lean Amari Cooper. And then he got the wild card Bell over Pollard. Yeah, I mean, I think he came out slightly ahead, in the deal.
There you go, Joey. Slide in our DMs at FF Hustle and teach us how to use Twitch. We'd appreciate that.
We really do need that help, actually.
Yeah, really. We'll put you on the payroll, which you can ask Corey, which
Drake and I we just send each other money, like we just swap money back and forth. That's how we feel like we're getting paid.
So we never got around to the Le'Veon Bell stuff because that broke, I believe, after our show. So let me get your thoughts here. Boy, oh boy, did CEH look like he was given his best league Corso. Not so fast, my friend, to the tune of 26 carries for 161. And he did have a touchdown called back due to a penalty. He caught 4 passes also. 5 of his carries went for over 10 yards. Man, he looked just phenomenal, carving up the Bills defense left and right. But your thoughts on Le'Veon Bell joining the team this week?
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire did look really good. I totally agree. But I thought he's looked good before, but that's definitely the most explosive I've thought he's looked. Like my big concern with him has really been, can he break a long run? It's like he's going to get caught all the time. And he really did look a little bit more explosive, in that game. But what I would say is, again, just like Deandre Swift, the role didn't change. He wasn't really getting a lot of the work on the long down and distance. He got a little bit of the work like he has been in the 2-minute drill, about 40%. The rest of that work was going to Darrell Henderson. He also gave up a carry inside the 10 that went to Darrell Williams. He gave up some third down work to Darrell Williams. So here's what I think. Le'Veon Bell takes over Darrell Williams' role. And look, he is Le'Veon Bell. He's better than Darrell Williams. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to have to do a lot to keep him from not taking over a little bit more. I just think it's going to be tough for Edwards-Helaire to keep Bell from not taking over just a little bit more than what Darrell Williams has had. Look, if you're willing to give Darrell Williams that much when you've got a guy like Edwards-Helaire, to me, it just kind of makes sense that okay, well then Le'Veon Bell's probably going to get a little bit more than that. Wouldn't you think, Drake?
I think he's going to be a great addition to the pass game because he's such a good blocker and pass protector. Drew Davenport,
and that's Darrell Williams' role right now. That's exactly what Darrell Williams does. He gets all the 2-minute work. He gets most of the long down and distance work. That's what I'm saying. I mean, Bell's going to take that over. But I also think Bell will probably take about 10 to 15% of Edwards-Helaire's carries. I think this is really going to suck for Edwards-Helaire's upside. Edwards-Helaire now is going to be very narrow, in his range, his sweet spot for his outcomes. There's not going to be room for these big blow-up games because, again, I still don't think he has the breakaway speed to be a threat to break 2 long ones every week. He just doesn't carry that. He doesn't have it. I think he could break one here or there, because angles and all sorts of things come into football. But I think, his upside, is literally where it used to be. Man, you could get a 40-point, 30-point week out of the guy. Now, I think you're pretty much going, okay, 25 points is probably my tops, and 15 is about the sweet spot of what I'm probably going to get each week from Edwards-Helaire.
Shout out to my guy, Drew Davenport from Football Guys. He and I are the presidents of the Darrell Williams fan club, and we tweet about him anytime he gets a carry. So we'll have to put that on the shelf for a while.
Congratulations on
that.
Hey, Darrell Williams was just my late season drop, in all my FFPC leagues. When I heard what happened, I was like, oh, I have a cut now. I can actually go pick up a second defense.
Mm-hmm. If you had CEH, and I know a lot of guys are asking this, do you hold him? Do you trade him? You kind of dangle him, see what you can get, or you just say,
dude, if you can dangle him right now, but again, you have to get something still of value in return. I just gave you what I think his range is. I think you're going to get about 15 points a week from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think you're going to have weeks where you still get 25 from him. I think you're going to have some weeks where he's, could be a little below 15, but I think he's basically a 15 to 25 point player. So that's still valuable, Drake, right? That's not crappy, so it's not like he's just a guy you push to the side. But if you think you can get, a lot for him, or somebody just comes to you with an offer you can't refuse, I mean, absolutely. I will say that as soon as Le'Veon Bell starts playing, one of two things is going to happen, right? Either Bell's going to come out and take over more than we thought, and Edwards-Helaire's value is going to just completely crap out. Or we're going to get into that game, and Bell's going to get no more than Darrell Williams. Or, look, coaches do weird things. Or all of a sudden Andy Reid saw this game, and he's like, yeah, I'm just going to get more to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, that's in the range of outcomes. I don't think that's likely. But if we see that literally Le'Veon Bell gets no more than Darrell Williams, right, then all of a sudden, you're going to feel bad if you just gave Edwards-Helaire up for nothing. So it's a tricky spot. It's a tricky spot for sure. But if you had to pick between the two outcomes, what's more likely? Le'Veon Bell just gets Darrell Williams' role, nothing more, or he gets Darrell Williams' role plus a little bit more. I would say that's the more likely scenario, meaning now may be your moment to sell high on Edwards-Helaire because everybody just watched him in that game on Monday. Well, everybody except people that have jobs, because that game came on so early. But people saw the highlights, and he looked really good. But his role wasn't any different.
I love you West Coasters, man. What a weird life you must lead. Obviously I live in New York, so I've never seen I don't know about games coming on at 5:00 in the afternoon. This is unbelievable. Come home, I'm eating dinner, my son, I'm watching the game. This is crazy. But question in the chat room, guy wants to know if he can actually start Lev Bell at a flex this week. I would be very apprehensive of starting him this week.
I would too. I mean, it needs to be, you need to be in a deep format with multiple flex spots, or you're just literally reeling right now from injuries. And if that's the case, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. Look, I'll be honest with you guys. Last week, and I've liked Swift, so I own him on like 6 or 7 rosters. I had 2 rosters where I had injuries and buys. Like I've got, multiple Eckler teams. You guys know there's plenty of injuries. You don't need to hear my sob song. But I actually had to put DeAndre Swift into 2 lineups. And it was kind of like the whole thing around Le'Veon Bell. Like I didn't feel good about it, but I was like, what do I do? And I'm not going to drop a really good player to go pick up a fill-in for a week that may give me 5 points or 8 points. I can get that from DeAndre Swift, and I just got lucky, right? Yeah. He went off for nearly 30 fantasy points. You could get lucky, with Le'Veon Bell. I would not want to put him in my lineup though, unless literally it was my last option. Not my very last, but you guys know what I'm saying. It's got to be a situation where you've exhausted all other potential avenues.
We're up to 2 people on Twitch right now, by the way. We're blowing up. We're taking over the video game universe.
Yeah, keep talking about
it. Hey, let's talk about James Robinson. We got a tweet during the game where someone came at us and they were like, what the hell? You guys love James Robinson. Guy stinks. He's not doing anything. And literally the guy caught a touchdown pass like the next play. So that's the, you got to let these games play out, folks. Just tweeting during the game, like there's, 7 minutes gone by in the first quarter. Like, why the hell hasn't my quarterback thrown 6 touchdown passes yet? Let it play. But yeah, let's talk about James Robinson, though, because in terms of rushing, if you want to say 3 of his last 4 games, he's rushed for under 50 yards, you'd be correct. One of those games he did score 2 touchdowns, but 29 rushing yards this week in a game where they just got boat raced, basically. The quarterback wasn't good. It just wasn't a great game. They look like the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's put it like that. But what are your thoughts on Robinson going forward?
They're the same. And that's kind of was my response. I wasn't trying to be rude, but we've talked about what James Robinson is on the show. We've said he is a slightly lesser version of Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs because he's not in the designs for passing on the early down works like Jacobs. Mm-hmm. He's really closer, to Mixon. And when you get into game scripts where you're losing, just like with those guys, there's not going to be enough, you don't get enough carries, right? So, James Robinson is, he's getting 80% of the team's rushing attempts. It just so happened that number equals 12, 13, and 17 over the last 3 weeks. So he's also on a team that likes to pass the ball more. right, than, say, the Raiders. Now, the Bengals pass the ball just as much, but they run more plays, right, than what the Jaguars do. So there's all these factors that really come into play. But as far as like his utilization goes, he's the exact same as those guys still. And here's the positive. For the second week in a row, he retained, actually the third week in a row, he's retained over 50% of the 2-minute work. And so his role is still technically expanding. The coaches are trusting him with more than what he's received in the past. So look, James Robinson is one of those guys that, he's in a 3-week down period. I would buy low if I could. I don't overpay, but I would definitely be willing to buy low. And this last week, he did 2 of his targets were on design looks on first or second down. So that's another positive. That means they're trying to find other ways to get him the ball. The outcomes just haven't been there. But, before you complain on Twitter, just remember, like you listened to the show, we said James Robinson, when he's in a really bad game script, it's not going to be good because this is what his role is. And now that happened. And that's all there is to it. I mean, it's pretty simple. And so those kind of guys, you just got to keep playing them, Drake, and they're going to have their good weeks. They're going to have their down weeks. And in the end, you're going to look up and you're like, oh, he's a middle of the road RB2. Occasionally he gives me an RB1 week. And then there's other weeks where he gives me an RB3 week. Very, very rarely, but on some occasions, he gives me an outside the top 36 running back week. But that's what this is.
Our show is long, and so are NFL games. You just got to sit through both. We can kind of parlay that into another
Keelan Cole real quick.
Had.
Can I say one thing about Keelan Cole?
Please.
While we're on the Jaguars.
Yes. How did I forget that?
Yeah. What's crazy is his role has changed. Remember early in the season, and you had mentioned it, like these low value targets, and you were perfectly right in saying that, like an ADOT of 6,
Thank you.
8, 6, 6.6. He was getting all this dink and dunk stuff. Now over the last 2 weeks, his ADOT has jumped to 19.2 and 20.9. So that's air yards of 115 and 188. Keelan Cole all of a sudden is working downfield. Drake, over the last 2 weeks, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's got 7 targets over 20 yards in the last 2 games.
That's because they only run Chenault on little crossers across the middle. He's not a deep threat. He's literally just hanging out in the middle of the field.
But that was the same early in the year. But they just had 2 guys doing that. And so now they're literally working him, and they're working Chark a little bit more vertical. Now, what I will say is DJ Chark being banged up, his ADOT was down the week before, and then this last week it was back up to a 14. I mean, Chark had 201 air yards this last week. He had 3 targets over 20 yards in the last game. So just a thing on Cole, as long as he's doing that, I mean, he's fine, as a, what the heck, kind of throw him in your wide receiver 3 or in a flex spot, and see what you can make happen.
They're always going to be in a shootout. They're always going to be behind or trying to fight back into a game.
Yep. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that about Keelan Cole.
This one we can do kind of quickly. Someone asked us, hey, what do I do with Aaron Jones? And I responded, you put him in your lineup because Aaron Jones is a top 5 fantasy running back, but they just got blown out by the Bucs. These things happen. Aaron Rodgers, one of his worst showings of his career. Tampa Bay just ate them alive, and you kind of just burn the tape on this one, I think, Dwayne.
Yeah, well, I mean, and this is what happened to Aaron Jones last year when you got into blowouts and games where they weren't able to run, really a ton of plays and some of those other challenges. Aaron Jones's role didn't change. He splits time with 2 other guys, but he's so efficient on his touches, and they scheme him up when he's out there that he typically overcomes it. But occasionally you're just going to have games where the guy can't. To be honest, and I know everybody's like, oh yeah, Aaron Jones says take your regression and stick it, where the sun don't shine. And that's pretty much true. And you're just happy and you just start him. But to some extent, like the guy does keep defying logic. Like as far as how much he's on the field versus the points he scores, like is way, way, way out of whack compared to like normal people and compared to other normal good players. Now he's really in a great scheme. He's playing with a quarterback that's playing out of his mind besides this last week. So yeah, you're going to keep starting him, But I mean, this is something we've known all along. Aaron Jones's snaps are usually in the 55% range. His routes are typically in the 40% range. His attempts are typically in the 55 to 60% range. None of that changed. That was all the same. Their offense just played really bad, and that's the difference.
Same story in Buffalo, where we saw Zach Moss return and Devin Singletary was held to only 32 yards rushing against Kansas City. That game was tight, but to me, it always felt like Kansas City was in command and they kind of dictated the tempo. And they had the ball basically the entire game. I mean, time of possession was ridiculous. They get the Jets this week, the Bills, that is. So the Jets give up the 5th most points to running back. It's the ultimate get-right game. But I just did want to bring up, because this is what we talk about here on The Hustle, the first snap that the Bills had inside the 5-yard line, Devin Singletary, who everyone's been, given HJs to the past 4 weeks, was not on the field. Zach Moss took the snap. I don't know
he's
if
not going to be on. Yeah, he's not going to be on the field in those situations. He's not.
There you go.
This goes back to the way it was before Singletary got hurt. So
no matter what he did in those 4 weeks, when people were like, "Oh, Devin Singletary's great," blah blah blah, boom, reverted right back to the same thing.
Week 1, Zach Moss saw 7 snaps inside the 5. 88%, so I mean, as far as the carries go on the season, Moss is still at 30%, of the carries inside the 5, and he's missed, 3 games. So Moss is going to get the old Frank Gore role. Devin Singletary is going to actually, his role from what you just saw this last week is now going to decrease again. And I think you're going to be back to like a 60-40 split. And really, Josh Allen is the main weapon down inside the 5. Which we haven't even really got to see a ton of yet from Josh Allen. We've seen some. So I think it's just a situation where you really, you don't want to be starting either of those backs unless you're really in a deep league. I mean, Singletary is the guy you're going to lean to because he's going to be a little more involved in the passing game. But we shouldn't just write Moss off. There was a point very early in the season where it looked like, wow, Moss looked like the better guy to own. So
write him off. I've held him in my biggest league for 3 weeks.
Yeah. That was going to be my point. If you're in a deeper league and he happens to be hanging out there, he's a guy that I still wouldn't mind rostering. I'm just not rushing to get him in my lineup.
No, but imagine if Singletary goes down, what opens up for him. Speaking of opening up, how about the holes Kenyon Drake had last night? I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, they did beat the Cowboys. So I'm going to go back.
Drake. I get it. Should I just let you do a monologue on this part?
There's a solo pod coming very soon. I'm very. I started listening to your cohort at ETR, Adam Levitan's solo pods. I've never listened to them before. I feel like he and I are very much the same person. Somebody who washes their hands 1,000 times a day and lives this dad life. But I just got into those today. So kudos to Levitan. Yeah. Very good show.
Yeah,
check that out if you want to. But hey, how about 164-2 for the Drake? Wow. I mean, we got my friend Joe Kelleher here, fellow Oswego State alum, asked, good time to sell high on Kenyan Drake, or do you think he showed us that yesterday is sustainable? So there's 3 great broadcasters for it that came out of Oswego State University. Steve Levy, who called the game, Linda Cohn, who does Sports Center, Joe, and myself, who watched it on our couches.
That's funny. Yeah, as far as Kenyan Drake goes, again, role didn't change. Same thing. Just had a really good matchup. But remember what we've been saying about Drake is he just didn't look the same. We don't know if it has to do with the boot that he had on during camp. Has he really been injured and he's just been playing through it? We don't know. But I mean, every week he sees about 60 to 65, 70% of the carries. Same thing. He's somewhere around 70% of the snaps. Same thing. The thing that was different, Drake, was the routes. His routes actually were a season high 60%. So that was up from 42, 46, 49. So he got a little bit more work there. Isn't that funny how it works? The week after, everybody says Chase Edmonds is taking over. We turn around and see Kenyon Drake actually get the most routes he's seen from a percentage standpoint. So, yeah, here's what you have to determine with Drake. Nothing really is changing about his role. It's pretty much the same.
He's the
You
rushing
just got to
back.
determine was that
work.
Yeah, was that just the Cowboys? And there's no doubt a big part of it was the Cowboys. Their defense sucks. And how much of it is maybe he's getting healthy. So that's what you have to determine for yourself. And I can't really, I can't tell you that. I did watch the game, all of it, until the very end. And I know you were watching it too, Dre. I wasn't super impressed watching him. Like, I didn't see the elusiveness that I used to see. Honestly, I felt like he had been told, just get the ball straight up the field. Almost like he had been dictated to stop being fancy or whatever it is that's going on. And remember, Adam Gase used to complain about him. Not that we care what Adam Gase says, but because he said he would take too many negative plays and it would put him behind and down in distance. So maybe some of that was going on, with Drake. And he's just trying to find his groove. But like for me, he basically ran into the first tackler he could find. I didn't see him avoiding anybody. I saw him taking really heavy contact for not being a super big dude. So I'm still a little worried about him. Like, that's the most I've watched him. And I kind of thought, doesn't look so hot, even though he's getting the yards. Like, I wasn't real impressed. Again,
he did
the
have
role's
the
same.
third fastest on that long run that he broke away. They clocked him at the third fastest touchdown of the season. So the speed is still there.
Yeah, he's a fast dude, but the explosiveness and the ability to make somebody miss in the hole, the ability to make a move at the next layer and then spring free, I didn't see him layering moves and doing the things like what I had gotten used to seeing him do at Miami and then in his short time last year, with the Cardinals. And again, it could be injury. So I guess that's a long way of saying if you can sell high, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with selling high, on Kenyon Drake. But again, part of this is the role didn't change. You just eventually get these kind of performances out of these guys, and some weeks you don't. And it comes in bunches sometimes. He's had a very long dry spell. He could all of a sudden go 3 weeks in a row where he does this.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's just something that you've got to look at, and you'd have to go look at the matchups, Drake, to really, determine. I'm looking at it right now. So Arizona gets Seattle this week, which is basically an even matchup. Then they get a bye week, and then they get a plus matchup versus Miami. Then they get basically, right at average matchups with Buffalo and Seattle, and a negative matchup with New England, the Rams. So, I mean, the schedule's not exactly peachy here over the they get to play Buffalo and Seattle twice in the next 5 weeks. Now they have a bye week in there, and then they get the Patriots. That's pretty tough.
Buffalo just got ran on like it's their job. So
yeah, that's also with a guy you got to worry about called Patrick Mahomes. Not to say that you don't have to worry about Kyler Murray, because you do.
Boy, he's fast. Hey, who do you think's a better running quarterback, Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson?
I think it still belongs to Lamar. Kyler, is definitely lightning quick.
Fast.
But the things we saw Lamar do last year with the spin moves and all that kind of stuff, that's insane. Kyler, fortunately, is really smart. Like, he does not take hits. He just gets down.
Yeah.
Because if he ever does, like, every time I watch him, I'm like, man, it's bad that you think this, but you're like, I just want to see what happens if he gets hit. Like, can he make it?
I thought that every play of the Eagles-Ravens game last week for some reason.
Yeah, you just want to see what happens if Lamar Jackson gets popped.
And then I realized, we have Nate Gary at linebacker. Like, my 97-year-old grandmother could outrun him.
You got Singleton.
They're so bad. My God.
You guys are starting special teamers all over the place.
Oh, my God. It was funny. So at one point, the Eagles have some 8th string tight end named Kroom, apparently.
Yeah.
And he caught a touchdown pass. He played one snap. He caught a touchdown pass on that snap. So my wife and I are watching the game down here in the basement, and he catches the pass, and she goes, "Who the hell's that guy?" And I go, "I think the fan ran on the field." And like they showed the replay, Wentz kind of double takes, looks at like, is that the
mascot? Throw it to?
Okay, what the hell? And he caught it, so good for him. But, whew. Hey, speaking of tight ends, let's go to Tennessee, where Jonnu Smith has an ankle injury, and you wrote on PFF an ETR in your great column that everybody should subscribe to those sites to read about a sneaky spot start here at tight end. You want to tell the folks about this guy?
Yeah, I don't know how sneaky it'll be because he went off. So he'll be the first guy at the top of somebody's waiver.
Please don't ruin my great build-up here.
But yeah, well, I'm just thinking, how these leagues work. People just sort by who scored the most points last week. That's who I want. Well, Ferkser's going to he's going to come to the top of the tight end list. It's really a scheme thing. Look, we saw what Jonnu Smith had been doing. And here's the thing, this thing with Ferkser and Tannehill, like it's not just this year. This guy's been catching touchdowns for 2 years now from Tannehill. He's kind of, he trusts this guy and, he's a decent player. And he's showing that. So, last week he basically stepped right into Jonnu Smith's role. And he went off. He accounted for 23% of the targets. He ran a route on 63% of dropbacks, which isn't great, but he was, targeted on, first look 78% of the time. He's going to get play action looks in this offense. So yeah, I think he's a guy that if you're hurting this next week at tight end and you're tired of, rolling Tyler Higbee's, 46% of routes out there, or, you got somebody else that's got you frustrated, then Ferkser is the guy. Don't go spend a ton of money on him. Let's see what happens.
They play the Steelers this week too.
Who cares? Like, I still play the guy. That's going to be a great game.
Oh,
like Tennessee,
bloodbath,
and Pittsburgh. I'm very interested, to see how that game goes. Man, Ryan Tannehill, dude, is a baller. Can we just say that now? That dude's a freaking baller. Adam Gase talk about the biggest curse ever. It has to be the Tannehill thing.
He just looks great. People get so scared with Tannehill because they go, he's not going to throw the ball over 20 times, so he could screw me. But, man, the guy just throws touchdown passes left and right.
But that's over now. Like, that's over. Those days are gone. Now, this offense is running a ton of play action, but they run a ton of plays. Their plays, yeah, I get it. We talked about it in preseason. Last year, over the last 2 years, they have one of the worst total plays of anybody in the league. But this year, dude, 81, 62, 75, 66, 75. Last year, they're all down in the 50s. So, this team that's a major improvement, for this offense. And, they're letting Tannehill cook, Drake. They're letting Tannehill cook.
Let me ask you a college football question here. Do you follow much college football? We've never talked about that.
Some. I love college football. I just don't. I have to pick my spots. I've got full-time job, got kids, family. Just like you. So I don't get to spend as much time watching it, but I do love it. I usually have it on. I just don't get to pay as much attention to it.
Well, the game of the year is this weekend, and it's Syracuse as a 9-point underdog in Death Valley against Clemson. The question: does Clemson cover by halftime? But mind you, Syracuse starting high school kids, maybe a 8th grader.
Yeah, Clemson has some high school kids too. They just look like they're 24. Yeah, dude, I have no clue. It's not going to be good. I don't know when they cover, but they'll how many points? That's insane.
Yeah,
39.
Syracuse. I've gambled once in my life with a bookie. Like, I got a kind of shady character that I know who's a bookie. And the first time Clemson joined the ACC, or the first time they played, once that happened, I went to the game, and Syracuse was a 20-point underdog. And I go, this is the easiest bet of all time. And I go, here's $100. Like, tell me what to do. And he goes, show up tomorrow and I will give you another $100. Okay. And that easily happened. Okay, we hit Tennessee. We talked Washington. We mentioned the Steelers because they're playing the Titans, so let's just stick with those guys. Claypool shines again. Only 4 targets, but he caught all of them for 74 yards and had a rushing score. It's kind of the new NFL now. Let's get these monstrous athletic wide receivers and run them. Deebo Samuel, Chase Claypool. Boy, oh boy, God, I wish Philadelphia had anybody with a pulse. But I want to talk about Juju Smith-Schuster, because we've had people ask now, like, do I just drop this guy? Like, what is Juju's role on the team? Is he dead? Like, and Deontay Johnson's not even playing right now. Freaking James Washington was leading the targets last week. Yeah. So, we got a question in the chat room. Deonte, what do you think of him when he comes back? And, Juju, should we call the police and send out a search party?
Man, it's a tough one. Like, he's out there. He seems to still be his cheery, normal self. To me, it's like, hey, yeah, things aren't going my way, but I'm eventually going to get, mine. And, the team is winning. But I mean, he leads the team in routes. Drake, he's getting to play out of the slot. He's had a tough couple of weeks. And even before that, he was getting some production on limited looks, so for whatever reason right now, they seem very interested in going to Claypool, and even went to James Washington, this last week. But I have a feeling that Juju's time is still going to come around. So at this point, it's like, what are you going to drop him for?
Ultimate buy low.
Yeah. Like, if you tell me, well, Dwayne, T. Higgins is sitting on my wire. Okay. You tell me Justin Jefferson's on my wire. Okay. Like, go for it. But if you're telling me, I don't know, give me a guy, Drake, there's a lot of guys that I'm still going to say no, and I'm just going to go ahead and stick to my guns on Juju. Look, here's the thing. It's not
Travis
very
Fulgham.
often. Yeah, I'm probably sticking with Juju. But the thing is, like, a guy like Juju broke out so young. He did it for multiple years. It wasn't like he was just a complete flash in the pan. Has it been harder since Antonio Brown has been gone? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But we have other weapons now that other teams are going to have to start paying attention to. Remember what we talk about all the time, Drake. Defenses are watching this film. They are really looking at the last 3 weeks. There's going to come a point where it's like, man, we got to take care of these guys outside. And then things are going to open up for Juju, and it's going to be there. I don't think there's some like secret hate, of Juju by Ben. I think it's just one of these weird things, it's just he's out there and he's in a pretty good passing attack. So I'm holding on to Juju. I have no problem if you're benching him, for now, but dropping him is a bit extreme unless you're in a really small league.
We got a couple of guys in the chat room asking about Tua. And Miami is going on bye, so we weren't going to talk about them, but, let's talk about the news. Parker with a groin injury, monitor that through the bye week. But your thoughts on Tua? Would you pick him up in a 2-quarterback league or something, a super flex? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in those formats,
how do you rank him going forward?
Yeah, I mean, in those formats, it's probably not even available. I mean, I don't know about you guys out there, but this is the fewest quarterbacks I've seen on the wire ever. I mean, everybody's carrying, and you told everybody, a couple of weeks ago, Drake, everybody needs to be carrying, 2, if not 3. And really everybody is. So, I mean, if Tua's out there and you're in a super flex, absolutely. If Tua's out there and you're playing in a 12 or 14-man league, you may even need to consider picking him up, if just depending on, what your quarterback situation is. You need to look ahead at your bye weeks, all that kind of stuff. My overall thought around the Dolphins offense is it's gonna get worse with Tua. I mean, look, I like him, and he could totally surprise us. And we've seen rookie quarterbacks here recently come out and just ball out. But Fitzpatrick was playing, really well. Just to be honest, and he was out there slinging it. So I think it's TBD. On Tua, but my gut would say we're going to see a reduction in Devontae Parker. We're going to see a reduction in Preston Williams. We're going to see, Gesicki, has really bounced all around, but he's out there all the time, so maybe Gesicki's, because Tua does like to work to the inside guys. Maybe Gesicki's the guy that really, gains some value, out of that. But I think it's just going to be a situation where we've got to monitor it early, Drake, and I'm going to try not to have any of those guys in my lineups if I can avoid it come week 8.
Boy, oh boy, what a hard watch the New England Patriots were. I own Cam in several leagues, and I'm always watching the red zone. I'm like, come on, Cam, just run it in. Don't give it to anybody else. Just you take it. Let's go. And Denver was stingy, man. They bottled him up. he had 157 yards passing, 2 interceptions. He luckily ran for 76 yards and a score. So I don't know if people are kind of figuring him out. And I saw a little breakdown on Twitter of, they're crashing. I think it was Bradley Chubb off the edge. And they said, basically, just go attack Cam every time that he gets the ball. But I also want to get your thoughts on James White, who led the team in targets and now in back-to-back weeks has double-digit PPR weeks. But you may have thoughts on why that is.
It's the trailing game scripts. The problem is the guy doesn't see enough first down work. He doesn't see enough of the work inside the 5. He gets all the long down and distance. He gets all the 2-minute work, but outside, those are the 2 things that are locked in for him. And that used to be enough with Brady because Brady would go into the 2-minute or the hurry up offense, quite often. So, he might do it 3 or 4 times in a game, every game, no matter what kind of game it was. And then they would have James White out there for those series. And that always helped, really make sure that his production, even though he may not have big weeks, he always had a really solid floor. And I think it's just different now. Because what we've seen in the other weeks where the Patriots have been able to run the ball and they have been able to get ahead and establish a lead, James White, now he's been out for a couple of weeks, because unfortunately the very sad situation, with his mom and dad having that accident and his dad passed away. So he was out for 2 games. But as far as from a fantasy perspective, in week 1, when the Patriots really manhandled, I'm trying to remember who they played that week, but they won that game very handily. And James White was, a complete non-factor. So I think it is going to still be tied to game scripts. I do agree with, your point on Twitter Monday morning, which was that he really is the second best weapon that they probably have in the passing game. And they do need to figure out how to get him more involved because N'Keal Harry and Damiere Byrd and even Edelman to some extent, I mean, they're just not cutting it, what I see right now, Drake, with the Patriots, it's a very condensed offense. Who's going to beat you deep? Nobody. What are their best weapons?
Trade for John Ross.
Yeah. That actually, if you can get him for cheap, that's what they do need a deep threat. But they need some kind of vertical presence. Everything is collapsed down. It's like, oh, Cam's going to run. And then so you go play action. Well, there's nobody open. So it's just kind of like, okay, great. Run, play action. We don't care. We're just going to keep stacking the box on you and crashing and doing all those things that you were talking about. People are breaking down on Twitter. I think the Patriots teams are going to challenge them to show that they can come up with something different, to beat them. And just remember, this shows you how bad Seattle's secondary is because Cam lit them up for over 300 with that crappy receiving core. Like that's insane.
Yeah, what I said on Twitter was James White, not only does Cam look at him as, hey, you're the only guy who's open, you're the only guy who's going to catch the ball. So it's a throw Cam also knows he can make. So, it wouldn't shock me if White becomes kind of – I said this at my home league fantasy draft. I said this year James White is going to be the white Christian McCaffrey, because obviously McCaffrey played with Cam all those years in Carolina. Well, we'll see what happens here.
Yeah. Somebody says Hunt for Godwin and Evan Ingram. I say yes. I would give Kareem Hunt for Chris Godwin. Abso-freaking-lutely. Before question from Donnie Andrews is Herbert versus Tannehill. It's Tannehill all day, every day, all the way. And yes, I like Herbert's schedule and all that, but look, man, still a rookie. Teams are gonna adapt. He's going to face those challenges. Tannehill is showing that he's fine. Somebody earlier said Tannehill is based all on Derrick Henry. That's not true. Yes, Derrick Henry is a key component in their offense, but play action is really the key. It doesn't matter if a running back is bad or good. Defenses still react to play action. You can have literally Brian Drake lining up in the backfield and run play action to him, and defenders are still wired that they have to react to play action. And
I would run a 4-3 past him, but
yeah. And you didn't let me finish the athleticism of Brian Drake. So there you go. So Deonte Johnson versus Marquis Brown. I'm going Marquis Brown right now just because Deonte can't stay healthy. Mostert versus I have Mostert, so they want Scott over Hastie. I would go Scott just because I know he's going to get the volume. Hastie's kind of a crapshoot still, Drake. I mean, if Jeff Wilson plays and McKinnon's out there, they could easily relegate Hastie, to maybe seeing 3 touches. So I think that's an issue.
Yeah. There you go, folks. We appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat room. We're on Twitter at FF Hustle. You can reach us there. You can leave comments here on the YouTube page. We'd love for you to hit like and maybe subscribe to the channel. That would help us out a ton as we're nearing 1,000 subscribers. That's amazing for our little channel. We appreciate each and every one of you guys. However you're finding the show, if it's driving in your car, listening on iTunes, or watching, while your kids are playing in front of you on YouTube, we really, really do appreciate it, Dwayne and I. And we're here each and every week during the season to help you make educated choices and win that fantasy championship. So for my good friend Dwain McFarland of Pro Football Focus and Establish the Run, I am Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. We will see you next week. And remember, never get out hustled.